Hey guys, I am one of the 6,500 people who have taken the DunedinPACE test, which tells you how fast your body is aging. In this video, I go through the data on the rankings website, rejuvenationolympics.com, summarise the original research papers, and figure out what actions people can take to get a better score. I also spoke to one of only 26 people to score below 0.6 to find out what their lifestyle looks like. Now, there are lots of tests on the market that claim to measure your biological age, that is, how old your body appears to be. Depending on how well you look after yourself, this number could be higher or lower than your chronological age, which is simply the number of years since birth. What's not understood about those tests is how fast your body is aging right now with your current lifestyle, which arguably has more practical value, and that's where a pace of aging test comes in. You can think of it like a speedometer for your rate of aging. The DunedinPACE test is the current gold standard for measuring how fast your body is aging at the time you take the test. It's been made popular by Brian Johnson, who has a world record low of 0.54 from his last 3 tests. What that means is he's aging at almost half the rate of the average person, and he's determined to get even lower. So how did they go about calculating the rate of aging? The original research started with a paper published in 2015, which was built upon in 2020, where they defined the DunedinPoAm, which stands for Pace of Aging from Methylation. You may have heard the term methylation before. It's the main mechanism by which these epigenetic tests for biological age work. Methylation is a way of measuring gene expression and can give a good indication of how lifestyle factors have influenced someone's DNA. The paper assessed 954 individuals who were born in Dunedin, New Zealand, between 1972 and 1973. At ages 26, 32 and 38, they measured 18 different biomarkers, which over time indicate how well the body is aging, including physical fitness, blood pressure, BMI, lung function and cholesterol levels. The data was fed into an algorithm that identified DNA methylation sites, which mapped closely with those 18 biomarkers. What that means is someone who isn't one of the people in the study could take a simple blood test and be told how fast they're aging. In 2022, the updated DunedinPACE paper was published, which now stands for Pace of Aging Calculated from the Epigenome. Here they took a 4th set of measurements when the participants turned 45, updating the original 18 biomarkers by dropping 1 and including 2 new ones, meaning 19 biomarkers in total, and rerunning their algorithm. The test itself is mainly sold through True Diagnostics in the US, but I was able to find a UK supplier which allowed me to avoid the import fees at a cost of £224. The box comes with a return envelope, instructions, lancets for pricking your finger, and most importantly, the dry blood spot card. After pricking my finger, I allowed my blood to drip into the circle until it was completely filled in, before popping it in the biohazard bag, which then slipped in the return envelope. I thought a lot about what number I'd like to see, and I decided that aging 10.5 months for every 12 sounded like a nice place to be, meaning anything 0.87 or lower. I was therefore thrilled when I saw my score of 0.73, which is more like aging 9 months for every 12. I was instantly less impressed when I saw the population graph that seemed to indicate that due to the average pace of aging increasing with chronological age, an average 37-year-old would have scored about 0.87. So where do I rank amongst everyone who's taken the test? On the website rejuvenationolympics.com, they share a longevity leaderboard, which is ordered by average pace of aging, but also by those with a verification badge. To obtain the badge, you need to have 3 tests in the last 2 years, which is somewhere between controlling for the noise associated with a single test and ensuring the company gets repeat sales. I analysed the full rankings to answer several questions, the first of which can be found by the sort function, which is if anyone is aging better than Brian Johnson, the millionaire on a mission to live forever. It turns out there are 5 people, including Kelly Curry with a score of 0.38. This isn't that unusual. If you do read the 2022 paper, it does state that someone from the original cohort achieved a score of 0.40. We've already seen that the average pace is below 1, and when I plot a histogram of best scores, it turns out 82% of results are below 1. Now, there is a selection bias here. The sort of people taking a DunedinPACE test are likely to be healthier than population average and therefore not representative. I was also able to split this data into males and females with about 60% of tests taken by men and no real difference in the distributions. Of the 316 verified people who've taken multiple tests, I looked at the average difference, which gives you a sense of how much your pace of aging could move between tests. Now, this shows the difference between their best score and their average score, which means the difference between two individual test results is actually larger than this. Now, this isn't a measure of test-retest reliability. People taking multiple tests are likely introducing lifestyle changes after the first test in a bid to get a lower score. To understand how much noise there is between tests, we can only look at a set of 36 pairs of replicate blood data from the 2022 paper. And if I plot those, you can see it's no more than a difference of 0.05, meaning my score of 0.73 is likely to be between 0.68 and 0.78. It's important to remember that the paper's original motive wasn't to create a test for individuals to use to assess lifestyle changes. They wanted a measurement that could be used in a research setting to assess how a group of people, on average, change their rate of aging before and after an intervention. One final way I grouped the data was by country. There was a lot of missing data, but from what I had, I was able to create a UK ranking, which identifies a customer who scored 0.59, putting them in the top 25 globally. They used the same clinic as I did, so I reached out to see if they'd be willing to chat to me about their lifestyle. He took the test last summer at the age of 35. He has a background in personal training, and a lot of our conversation revolved around diet. Touching quickly on exercise, he has 3 full-body resistance workouts a week, takes regular walks, and commutes by bike, which ends up being around 25 minutes a day in the equivalent of zone 2. All of that allows him to maintain a body fat of around 10 or 11%. There was a strong focus on diet. He had researched different areas of the world with the healthiest populations, including several blue zones and well-studied tribes. A combination of celiac disease and trying to manage symptoms like brain fog led him to his current diet, which has eliminated not only gluten, but most grains, legumes, nuts, seeds, and dairy. What's left is a strong focus on plantains and tubers, so potatoes and sweet potatoes, with occasional white rice. Fat sources are olives, olive oil, and avocado. Protein is coming from fish and shellfish, some poultry, and a lower intake of lean red meat and eggs. Other areas of note are the consumption of seaweed, fresh and dried herbs, matcha and black coffee, with the only supplements being creatine, collagen, and omega-3. It was great to chat to him and refreshing to see that such low scores can be obtained from quality nutrition and regular exercise. My own test came with a consultation to discuss my score and what I could do to improve. Given the test is designed around a cohort of people who were assessed for 19 different biomarkers, it makes sense to understand each of those biomarkers as a starting point. Firstly, BMI and waist to hip ratio. BMI is an imperfect tool for measuring body fat levels, but at the population level, it does a reasonable job. Waist to hip ratio is likely an indication of visceral fat around your organs. So, being overweight or obese, as well as having a disproportionately large belly, is very likely to increase your pace of aging. Blood pressure is hopefully self-explanatory. You can buy a cuff and measure this at home, as I do every year, and the goal would be to stay under 120/80, with higher values being labelled pre-hypertension or hypertension. Next are some measures of cardiovascular fitness and lung function, including VO2 max and FEV1. The latter is forced expiratory volume, a fancy way of saying how much of your lungs you can empty in 1 second with a strong blow. This is an indicator of poor lung function, including conditions like asthma and COPD. VO2 max has one of the strongest correlations with longevity and can be improved through regular exercise. There are a whole host of estimated VO2 max tests, including the 3-minute step test and the Rockport walking test. The next 11 are all blood markers. This includes 5 for cholesterol, total cholesterol, HDL cholesterol, ApoB over ApoA ratio. You can very loosely think of that as your ratio of bad to good cholesterol, though those terms are quite misleading. Triglycerides and LP(a). If you've listened to Peter Attia for any amount of time, you'll know he insists that everyone knows their LP(a). Its level is mainly genetic, so you only need to do the test once, but high levels lead to worse cardiovascular outcomes, meaning it then becomes more important that you actively control your other cholesterol markers in order to reduce your overall risk of heart disease. HbA1c is your diabetes marker. This is equivalent to a snapshot of your average blood sugar for the last 90 days. Leptin wasn't in the original study, but was added alongside one of the oral health markers, with telomere length being removed. Lower levels of leptin are considered better, and a high level would indicate high levels of body fat. CRP is an inflammatory marker. This will pick up even low levels of inflammation in your body that are negatively impacting your health. Then white blood cell count relates to your immune system. It's measuring the number of leukocytes in your blood. Again, high values could indicate infection or inflammation. eGFR is a calculated measure. The E stands for estimated. It's an indication of kidney function. The two blood markers you'd use to test for this would be creatinine and cystatin C, and there are equations online to convert that to eGFR. Urea or blood urea nitrogen is another biomarker that assesses how well your kidneys are clearing waste products from your blood. The final two are related to oral health. I had to ask my hygienist about these. Periodontal attachment loss is a measure of the damage to the support structures of the teeth, while the tooth surfaces are assessing tooth decay. Note that a single tooth has 5 surfaces that could become decayed, including those between your teeth, which is why flossing is so important. Personally, as someone who loves all things data, I already track a lot of these. I even recently purchased a spirometer to measure my FEV1, and when put in a dashboard, my scores look like this. With a score of 0.73, it's no surprise that many are at a healthy level. Dark green is optimal where it exists, otherwise light green is the normal range. Picking out the orange abnormal values, Lp(a) is largely genetic, so all I can do is continue my focus on the other 4 markers of heart health. A low white blood cell count is something I've been aware of for years. It is consistently low, which is less concerning than something in decline. And I've seen a paper stating that in a healthier population, 3.2 could be considered normal. Then eGFR, this is calculated from creatinine, which hovers around 120, partially due to my very high protein diet. I've also tested with cystatin C, which is less susceptible to dietary protein and muscle mass. And using the blended equation for eGFR, I get 92, which is normal. However, I'm still planning to reduce my protein intake from around 150 grams per day to 120 to spare my kidneys from doing quite so much work. Ultimately, I do feel like this was a worthwhile test, though it's been somewhat misapplied for commercial gain in the sense that the original purpose was to study changes in a group of people. Unless you're changing your score by more than 0.05, any difference could be explained entirely as due to noise. The paper accepted other limitations, including the fact that it was only really validated on cohorts that were largely white Europeans. I thought it was interesting that when you looked at the effect sizes with other measures, facial age, as rated by a panel of experts, and self-rated health are some of the best predictors of how well you're aging, which makes complete sense. Unfortunately, those are harder to monetize. People generally agree that the marketing is ahead of the science right now, but the science is evolving pretty quickly. The Dunedin cohort have been tested every 7 or 8 years, and this year, 2025, they are due another checkup at the age of 52. That means that in a couple of years' time, another paper could be released with an updated algorithm, and suddenly all of these results have become outdated. Finally, methylation is exciting, but being able to relate it back to biomarkers that I know how to influence makes it so much more actionable. For me, it's emphasized that my priority should be to stop eating like an elite strength athlete and bring my protein down to a more sensible range. Thanks for watching.